In this week's episode of Adaptation, Deborah sits down with Hollywood movie producer Stephen Nemeth. The show is packed with anecdotes, advice, adaptations gone awry, and the unique challenges of producing classic novels.
Hello.
Oh, hi, you. How are you?
Thanks for doing this with me.
Are you kidding? Such a pleasure. I like yakking with you anyhow. It's a good excuse to do it.
So I wanted to start off talking to you about Fear and Loathing, which you produced. I was listening to the Hunter-Gatherer. Is it Hunter-Gatherer or Hunter-Gatherers?
Hunter-gatherers.
Hunter-Gatherers podcast. And on that, you said that your favorite books growing up were Catcher in the Rye and Fear and Loathing.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering how old you were when you read Fear and Loathing.
Fear and Loathing was actually something that everybody read, at least in my experience, in high school. So I would say I read Fear and Loathing at 17. I think I read Catcher in the Rye at 12 or 13.
Do you remember what it was that you really connected to specifically with Fear and Loathing? Was it, I'm wondering if it was the protagonist, if it was their journey, if the political overtones really struck you, or if it was kind of a combination?
I think it's kind of exciting as you get older to become just insanely open and honest. And I think the real reason that I loved it at the time as much as I loved it is because everybody else loved it. And then I realized, I actually do have my own opinions. I liked it more and more when I started thinking about why I liked it. And it was for all the reasons you mentioned. But more importantly, I think it was the first experience I'd ever had with a person who was writing in a style that I had never experienced and that we now know is, gonzo journalism. So many people I talk to in the doc world, which has become a big part of my oeuvre, top maybe 10 most annoying words of all time.
Yeah, it's annoying to spell as well.
My twin sister put together a list of the top 10 most annoying words in the English language. She didn't have that one. I just added it. But jamboree, jubilee, bonanza, these are words that are on her top 10 most annoying words list.
I would push back against some of those. Maybe we can all get together and talk about that.
Well, I'd be happy to. For hours. It just wouldn't end. Anyhow, so when people talk to me about docs, which I find to be amazing, and they are also underlying material for narrative features now. They are their own IP that we theoretically create. But people say, well, I need a writer for my doc. And with all due respect to people who write out docs, in many cases, it's best not to write out a doc. In many cases, it's best a la true gonzo journalistic, style, just to see where it goes and start the interview process, start the process and see what leads to what. In most cases, I found that your documentary will always digress from what it is you originally thought it was going to be. And I think the best example of that is a movie called Capturing the Freedmans, a documentary that one of the 3 or 4 Jarecki brothers, who are all wonderful, interesting people in their own right, directed. And I believe, and obviously, if the correct Jarecki, listens to this, he'll correct whatever I have mischaracterized. But my understanding is that he was fascinated with the birthday clowns at his son's 3rd or 4th birthday party in New York City. And he started to do a documentary on clowns. Who are you? What is your, what are you in your other life? Apparently he was unpacking this and it became something way more than he had originally thought it was going to be. And he started unpacking and pulling the layers of the onion away. And it became about this family that has a lot of deep, dark secrets. That, my friend, is not a birthday clown documentary. So anyhow, I'm going to get back to your original question, which was what did you like about it? And it was the gonzo journalistic, style and approach that I found very captivating and very real and very authentic. Plus, he was very smart, beyond funny, charming, irreverent, nasty, drug-fueled, which is something that was a fascination for me, even though I'm not a big drug addict.
You're still a little drug addict?
I'm very blessed with a non-addictive personality. In fact, you can leave a pound of cocaine at my home, and I'll remind you 7 months later.
I know right where to stow my stuff next time I'm in town.
Yeah,
I had never written anything like my last book, Drop In, and that was essentially, I thought of it like a documentary on paper. And to your point,
oh my God, that's so bitchin'.
um, but to your point, in order to sell it, I had to write a book proposal. I would say that 98.9% of what I wrote in that book proposal, which was 60 pages, did not make it into the book. You can't write a documentary. You have no idea where it's going to go. You have no idea what each person you meet is going to say. And they're 9 times out of 10 going to say things infinitely more interesting than anything you could have possibly planned.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you think you know what you want to achieve. You're excited about your subject,
Yeah.
but where it goes, nobody knows. I actually had developed, speaking of adapting books, this is a really good story. Um, a book called No Blacks, No Dogs, No Irish. It's the Johnny Rotten bio. You want to hear the story?
Yeah.
I optioned the book, No Blacks, No Dogs, No Irish.
And who wrote it again?
I can't remember.
Writers' names aren't important.
Oh, God, nobody cares about writers. So
Okay.
I befriended Johnny a bit, and to the extent you can befriend him, he's an odd duck. There's no question. We hired a screenwriter that really was the right guy. I brought him to Johnny's house in Malibu, where he was living with his older German wife. I think they said they had 22 beers each. He got the job and then wrote the screenplay. I gave Johnny script approval because I thought, I really don't want to make this movie if he's not approving, if he doesn't like it and doesn't. But I didn't realize how difficult it would be to get his approval. It was 2 years, and he had read several drafts and never complained about anything. I had Penelope Spheris on board to direct. I had $8 million in British financing and a British then movie star to play Johnny. And then I said, Johnny, we're ready to rock. I just need your script approval. He says, I don't want to do it. And I said, well, why? He said, well, that writer doesn't know fuck all about me, mate. I said, why? He said, well, page 23, Johnny walks over to the fridge and gets a beer. I said, yeah. Well, we didn't have no fucking fridge, mate. I said, so maybe walks over to the cabinet and gets a warm beer. How about that, John? How about there's an ice bucket? No, we didn't have no fucking fridge, so he didn't want to do the movie. And then he wrote a bunch of notes. Forgive me, one is a dirty word. He crossed out an entire page, and he wrote "too cunty."
That's not a swear word in Britain.
Okay, so no, it's not. Several pages later, there was an X through another page that said "middle class twat talk."
God, it's so good.
That was his note. So the moral of that story is, well, we want to honor our subject. We want them to be happy. We want to be collaborative. You have to protect yourself also. That was an adaptation gone awry. I learned.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you what were the unique challenges to making an adaptation versus just making a strict narrative. Have you ever had a situation where the author didn't like the script or the actors, or it veered so far from their vision that it was either hard to make or the relationship soured?
Yeah, you asked 94 questions just now.
Sure.
I'll answer one as best I can, which is yes. Our first director was
For Fear and Loathing?
Yeah, was Alex Cox, and he went to Owl Farm and Woody Creek. Then it went awry, and Hunter basically just nixed Alex completely. Hunter wasn't an easy guy. Alex isn't an easy guy, but he's smart. I think it was just, I don't know, maybe it wasn't Hunter's choice. Maybe there were other people, whispering in his ear. I don't know. We ultimately went with Terry Gilliam. And then the other thing is that you had asked the question about, what's the difference between adapting a book as opposed to just a regular narrative or whatever. I don't know the question, but the listener can
Challenges, like
rewind and hear the actual question.
unique challenges to one versus the other.
The truth is that not all great books will make great movies. Not all great figures, known figures, are interesting cinematically. And people say, "Well, I have the rights to so and so," and I'll say, "So what? It's like, I've heard of them and they're talented, but what's the story? What's the arc? Who gives a shit?" There are plenty more people you've never heard of that are way more interesting than people you've heard of, which is why my dad used to read the obituaries, and I still, to this day, do that. I find it so fascinating to read, incredible stories about people whose lives are so magical and so important and so dramatic that we never would have heard of or known about but for the obit. Dovetailing back to the question about the book is that, a lot of books, you have to just take the nugget, the grain, the through line, and find the movie, because it's not the same as reading, chapters of a book. And there's a lot of work to be done, and some books just cannot be adapted. And in many respects, we've heard over the years about books that have been optioned, legendary books, and never been made. But for what reason? The greatest example I can think of right now is Ignatius P. Reilly and Confederacy of Dunces, the great book that has gone through I don't know how many drafts, and 4 or 5 actors attached have all subsequently died. It's interesting. I mean, I don't think it's all coincidence, because the Ignatius Reilly character was enormous, morbidly obese, and Chris Farley, and I think Belushi, and I think maybe John Candy, and one other larger than life character had been attached at one time. But I haven't read the script, but I just assume, other than obviously estate issues and maybe too much money against something, that they probably haven't nailed it yet.
So IP is such a thing right now in Hollywood. Like, there's just this frenzy about buying books, and specifically buying like the hot books, what the publishers put the marketing money behind, right? And like, I can't remember the number, but it's some insane number, like 300,000 books are published a year, and there are only 5 hot books. So then everybody clamors to get the rights to these books. And it made me think about when I was rewatching Fear and Loathing, and then I know you had mentioned that you were working on an animated version of it. And I was really curious about how having a longer lens historically on the story is, if it is changing the way that you're telling that story.
It's a good question, and it's an excellent point, because I got Fear and Loathing made 25 years after it was published. And it had been, by the way, a very hot book since it was published. So many people had tried and failed to make that book. I'll do the best I can without botching it. The head of the Democratic Party, who was actually a friend, an acquaintance of mine whose children were my friends, a guy named Max Palevsky, I think first commissioned a screenplay for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I believe it was Robert Downey Sr. that adapted it for him. Over the years, there were actors attached and directors attached, Aykroyd and Belushi, and then Nicholson and somebody else, and some huge directors. I think people might have been scared. It may have been too close. It may have been, frankly, uninteresting from a marketing perspective at that time. Who knows? 25 years later may have been a little too late or a little too early, because it didn't really, move mountains at the time. I think it only did 13 or 15 million dollars at the box office when it came out, which would be a much bigger deal today had it come out. It's a much bigger deal today than it was then. The animated feature, I think, which we can go into in great detail, I think it's going to be a much bigger deal now than the film was then. Having said that, everybody involved in the film is very proud of it. It didn't take its most obvious commercial turns, but it was true to the book, very authentic, and I think the purists really have embraced it, and that's why over the years it keeps growing in popularity and remains to be considered one of the great cult classics.
How would you characterize, aside from it not being live action, the storytelling in the animated version versus the live action version?
I don't think that the storytelling will be much different. I do think that the visual experience will be dramatically different. A lot of people obviously view it as a great piece of great literary work. They also view it as a great trip and a great diversion from reality. And they want to immerse themselves in it in a way that maybe Hunter was experiencing it when he had written it. And these are the kind of things I think we can do in an animated movie that we can never do in a live action movie with, the red shark is the red Chevy driving down that hot pavement, that hot I-15 on the way to Vegas, morphing into a shark. These are things that are just exciting to think about. I want to see them. I think a lot of people want to see them.
Is the style in the Ralph Steadman style?
The short answer is absolutely. We're still putting the pieces together, and Stedman, I think, in principle, has signed off. It's his legacy. I think that it'll be absolutely inspired by, and in some cases, directly lifted from his works, and maybe new works created, new scenes. Because I think there are not that many images in the book, by the way.
No, there are very few illustrations.
I don't even know what the number is, but it's shockingly low.
Well, where are you in the process? Like, can you tell us anything about
The movie?
Yeah, director, cast, or
Yeah. Well, my partner on it is a guy named Corey Campidonico. His company is called Shadow Machine, and they won the Academy Award a couple of years ago for Guillermo del Toro's version of Pinocchio. And I was put together with him by a woman named Margaret Kramer, a legendary music supervisor and producer. So we are in deep development, and we are storyboarding, and then we are going to attach the right director very soon. I think we've narrowed it down to 3 people, but also there's an art director involved, which is a very, very specific skill set also, and that might be Ralph if he's game. When we opened up, you'd mentioned Catcher in the Rye and Fear and Loathing. The interesting thing about Catcher in the Rye, speaking of books that I think will never get made, is that J.D. Salinger, from what I understand, has specifically said in his estate planning, that in his will, that this book I wrote to be read, not to be seen, and it is to never be made into a movie. I'm pretty sure. I think it was Robert Redford, that went after the rights, and I remember hearing stories at the time that it was not going to happen. There's an example of a classic work that isn't a movie, and I believe it's because it can't be right now.
would you go for that IP if it came up?
It's funny. Probably now I wouldn't, because I'm too. I think it's too much of a responsibility. I don't want to be the person to get that wrong. Would I love the glory of getting it right? Sure, but the risk is too great, and I'm not so full of hubris. Only I can make this right. Interestingly enough, there's the remake rights or the sequel rights to Citizen Kane that are part of the RKO library. And I don't think that's going to get made for the same reason. I think people are too scared. Who wants to be that person?
Yeah.
You just read the critics, just with their claws out for that sucker, unless it's perfection,
It's such a gorgeous piece of work as is, so why fuck with it?
I fully agree. Almost a segue into The Elephant Man. Let me bench it for a second, because I want to talk to you about, people not remaking things so swiftly, or why they're remade or why they're not remade. And every 7 years there's a new, Superman for no apparent reason. I have 4 other Hunter Thompson projects going. A partner of mine, JD Rosen, and I, JD we own the rights to The Curse of Lono, which is kind of Fear and Loathing in Hawaii in 1981, covering the Waikiki Marathon. Interestingly enough, there is a little bit of a debate going on there, because Hunter really got into the god Lono, which is very, very, very important to the indigenous Hawaiian people. And the current draft is really good, but it doesn't go into the mysticism as deeply as a lot of the purists want to see it. That's a big, big issue in this book, because we've spoken to, and even for a while brought on a Hawaiian director who really wanted to push it in that direction. JD and I don't even totally agree on it. I want it to be more mystical. I want it to be more focused on and respectful of, the Polynesian gods. JD thinks it should be much more of a comedic romp, and there's no right answer. And I think at some point we will get there. We'll find that balance.
Thanks for listening to Adaptation. Stay tuned next week for part 2 of our conversation with Stephen Nemeth.